Uh,
Okay, praying.
welcome to In My Crumble Opinion Shorts again. I'm here in conversation with my friend Brandon Krajewski. If you don't know who I am, my name is Robert Perez slash Phoebe Cakes. Brian Krajewski is a collaborator of mine. We wrote a movie together a really long time ago called Stone Fruit. And this is the second time that we're getting together and talking about film. Specifically,
Yeah.
this is going to be our kind of thoughts on Challengers, the new Luca Guadagnino film. Full disclosure, this actually isn't the first time we recorded this. We recorded this once before. We screen recorded ourselves doing a FaceTime. Did not know that you would lose audio when
Audio
you,
separate.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we both made two videos with no audio, which triggered us and reminded us of the movie that we made together that also lost audio for the first how many scenes?
Yeah, it was like 10 minutes actually. It was quite horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we
Which
made
I
it
think
work.
was like the length of our challengers conversation. So it really was life imitating art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to also keep this conversation between 10 and 15 minutes. So somebody on the couch over there, I got my twinks over there, my own Art and Patrick. Somebody set a timer for 15 minutes. We're gonna end this at 15 minutes, no matter where we are in our discussion.
Okay.
But
So you
we're
do
here.
see yourself as Zendaya. That's it, obviously.
Yeah, we're both Oakland baddies with a twink problem. You must
Yeah.
be Patrick because you're stinky
I
and
mean,
messy.
I do have facial hair, and I was trying to find a really like a sweatband to wear, but I don't have any. So this is the
Yeah,
most challengers outfit I could find.
yeah. Um, what animal are you? People say that the Challenger boys are like mice, like rodents. Do you see that?
Yeah, I guess they're kind of sniveling and groveling for a big piece of cheese for
Okay,
attention.
yeah,
I guess I
sure.
can see that.
Yeah, emotionally they are rodents, but I think physically they give off kind of mouse vibes.
Yeah, I mean, I think Josh O'Connor, especially the big ears, I would definitely put him in some kind of mousetrap. Actually, I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk about having sex with animals. I don't want to start
Well,
creating those
no one said
conversations.
sleeping with animals. You brought that up.
I did bring it up, so I'm stopping it. I'm stopping
Well,
it, and
my
we're
question
getting
was
into our
what
10
what
minutes.
what mammal if you weren't if you weren't a human would you be? That was my question.
Oh, mammals. So like snakes and stuff can't count, obviously, right? They're not mammals.
Well, I guess you could if you want to claim snake, you could claim snake.
No, no, I was just asking. Okay, I would say some kind of like hawk or eagle. That's what I aspire
Oh,
to
a
be. That is
bird.
not what I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the movie. We might just cut that part out. That's eating into our 15-minute time limit. Before we get started, can you just synopsize the film for us to the best of your ability?
Sure. This is a sports movie, tennis in particular, about Patrick and Art, who have sort of a long standing friendship, but also kind of rivalry. They went to tennis school together, and as they're thinking about turning pro or going to college, they run into Zendaya, who is kind of successful in the women's circuit. And it's about them, the triangle of them competing for each other's attention and career, and the messiness of it all.
Great. I love that. That's a nice, succinct. I feel like the people that are watching this probably already love Challengers and just wanted to hear other people talk about it and
Okay.
not necessarily deliberating on whether, we would recommend it or not. I would recommend it. I think it's one of my favorite films, maybe of all time. From
That's
when I
insane.
first
You
saw
haven't been
it.
watching enough movies if that's the case.
Well, I'm admitting that there's some recency bias, but I really do feel like after this film ended, I thought about it often and continuously, obsessively, still listening to the soundtrack. You, per
I
our
don't have
last
that same
discussion, I know
challenge.
you had a very different feeling.
Yeah. Well, I guess if it's do I recommend or not, it's I recommend, yes. But I didn't really think about it ever again. I don't need to see it again. The only reason I've been forced to think about it again is so I can be here today. Um, I get my Josh O'Connor fix through The Crown, at least the last couple of seasons of The Crown and elsewhere.
Okay, yeah,
Zendaya,
Thayer said that he was hot in The Crown, and I'm just like, I don't think I could ever find Prince Charles hot.
well, Prince Charles definitely got an upgrade because Josh O'Connor played him in The
Yeah,
Crown. I don't know that I found like
culture
his
plane.
sniveling to mommy attractive, but I think he's just attractive generally.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
no, he's
in a
attractive.
mouse
Did
sort
you
of way.
like God's Own Country?
No, I had the same problems with that as I did with most gay movies. It's sort of like
Sad, piney.
sad, set in a time in a country where two men are not allowed to be together, and just it was fine. There wasn't much there besides that. Again, I thought both men were attractive in that movie, but
Yeah, no,
there really wasn't much there for me.
I feel like he didn't deserve the other guy. Like he was kind of a piece of shit. I mean,
Okay,
tormented for
do you
sure.
think he deserves art?
I think they deserve each other. I
Okay.
think a lot of the movie is about the strength of the attraction and desire and futility of that triangle, and kind of what happens when it's out of balance or they're disconnected. Like something the universe or their drives are always going to kind of bring them back together. So in that sense, I don't know if it's like I like them as a couple, but I do want them to be together.
Okay. Okay, that's nice. So you as Zendaya are just gonna you're gonna let them go.
Yeah.
You have to
Um,
walk away.
I feel like we were talking about this film so much more intelligently the first time we tried to do it.
We
So,
were. So
so
I will
yeah.
say, like, although I like the film, there are like a lot of caveats to that.
Mhm.
And part of it was the structure for me, which we argued about what made
Yeah.
it work for you and what didn't make it work for me. So we can talk about that.
Yeah,
For
let's talk about
me,
the structure. You did not like it.
right. And I think, I sort of understand that the back and forth in terms of time is sort of like a tennis match in terms of editing in its own way. You
Sure.
know,
Yeah,
2 weeks
absolutely.
earlier, a few days earlier, hours earlier, one ball movement later, whatever it was, it just. I think when you do that, you sort of strip a film of any chance of narrative or character complexity because we
I
have our forward moving story, which is the very last match, which kind
mm,
of takes closest to present day, and then any sort of cut scene to it is really only to give us kind of expository details about why what we're seeing in the present sort of matters. It only kind of gives basic facts, like this is how Tashi hurt her knee. This is why her and Patrick broke up, and it doesn't really build character, but rather just kind of serves as a simple linear story.
okay. So this is where I want to offer some counter arguments or counter perspectives. I think I love the format of the film just from a pacing standpoint. Like you said, it obviously is in quite literal way kind of mapping kind of like the rhythm as one would the ball bouncing back and forth. Like that final kind of rally as they get closer and closer to the net. It's very much like the film. The film's very dilated at the beginning. We get flashbacks that are like 13 years prior, and then we get closer and closer to the present. So you kind of get to re-encounter that format in like micro and macro kind of instances. But in terms of like, oh, we're not getting a lot of character development, I also feel like that is somewhat intentional. This film's kind of about desire and repression and the ways in which these characters don't kind of authentically relate to one another. So that's very much a film that's not necessarily invested in kind of like giving to us or showing to us, telling to us, excuse me, the internalities, but really kind of showing what repression does and how it makes people behave. So we're kind of building our understanding of these characters' drives through kind of like their actions, which are, um, which people would
Are
say like not good behaviors or they don't always act with a lot of integrity, but I actually feel like they're very real to me as people in
are
terms of
they?
like
What could you tell me about them? Personality wise, like if they're real to you, which of the three would you maybe most get along with?
Personality wise, and who I would most get along with. I think I would get along with all three pretty
Of course you would.
easily. I
Yes.
think it would become a quadrilateral if they had added me to the equation.
What's the one that is like really warped on one side if
A
it's four?
tesseract? I don't know. A trapezoid?
That's what you would be. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah. But in terms of like who are they? I mean, I feel like Patrick's character is this charismatic person that feels most comfortable when they're in the forefront and where they're having the most attention. I think Art likes to be near someone that's very powerful and successful, but at the same time also really envies them and resents them, but also like their entanglements with one another are also very desirous of each other. So there's like mutual attraction as much as there is rivalry. I think Tashi is also a controlling person. And that's why I think Tashi and Patrick have such a strong, brutalizing relationship, to use a term from the soundtrack. But, these three people who are so deeply attracted to each other, and, kind of fundamentally different in these like specific ways, are also completing each other in these interesting ways. So I don't know. I could say a lot about what I understand about them, and I don't think I got that because the film, told me what those are. It's something that I discovered from watching them, kind of their relationship across time.
Okay.
Um, the last thing I want to say about like the format of the film is that I also like that I say this in my personal review. It kind of queers the film because we're not like driving toward marriage. It's just like a film where people were unmarried, and then at some point, we get to see how they're like, you know, unified in this romantic way. It was like we start the film, Tashi and Art are already married, so it's like that's not part of the narrative. The narrative is about like what does their relationship mean in relationship to to Patrick.
Yeah.
I think that the format helps us investigate those themes as opposed to, spoon feed us these narrative structures that we were kind of predisposed to receive.
Okay. I don't feel the same way about the structure,
Okay.
and or the characters and all that. I think for me, you're right. This is just not that kind of movie
Yeah.
where it's about understanding, what they exist in sort of this like cultural void to me. You hardly see anyone in the outside world except these three people. There's one scene where,
Heaven forbid.
well, I mean, they're going to college and they never mention any sort of like musician they like or any. There's no pop culture references, and again, I don't need it to be like laden with this, but these
Mhm.
are all like small kind of character building things, and there's also no room or
I
time for
see. I
reflection.
feel okay. This is another point. I love that we're disagreeing because I think I overpromise kind of us fighting. Like when I say that I'm bringing you on, to talk. I hate period pieces that like hit you over the head with like, oh, this is like 1999, so we're gonna play some Matchbox 20 in the
Sure.
background, or like
Yep.
like I'm gonna, this came up last time. Is like Saltburn was just like so laden with like, oh, this is this time period, so we're gonna like pepper in these things, but it felt so inauthentic to me. I thought it was a very successful period piece. Like you couldn't tell me that 2019 wasn't serving 2019 or like 2013. It's just like I went to college. I know what Stanford looks like. Like it felt real. It felt authentic. I don't feel like it needed kind of these like cultural signifiers of like what year they were in. I also
Sure.
buy the three actors, if we can kind of talk about performance too, them as 19-year-olds and them as 33-year-olds. Like I felt like they're really at home in kind of the different epics in their life.
Yeah, I thought that was all good, and I should say that I think there is a difference between, some like watching a movie created today that's in the '80s, and then they bring out a can of Tab and pop it open. I don't
Hmm.
really mean that per se. I think there are really subtle ways to add that rather than having someone slap on their favorite song on a boombox.
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah.
need all that. There is a space in between what you're saying and what this is, which has none of that.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
just
you're saying is just like you don't know if Patrick likes death metal or if he likes
no.
alternative
I
music.
mean, that's
You
like a
know, is
really
he listening to Alanis
oversimplification
Morissette?
of it.
Yeah. Um,
It's just sort of a, because they don't encounter anyone outside of themselves, and they don't talk about anything really except tennis. I just don't really know who these characters are. Yes, one is manipulative, and yes, one likes to be around success. But to me, those aren't really super interesting character traits. Again,
well,
I
it's
like the
kind of
film.
no, I like that as well. Is like as much as these characters don't like try to disconnect from each other and are just like always continually pulled back into their relationships with another. I think likewise is like as soon as these characters like express aspirations of being outside of the world of tennis or outside of each other, they get sucked back into it. I mean, Tashi says at the beginning of the film is like, I want to be more than just a tennis player, you know, and then eventually halfway through the film we learn is like actually I'm not, you know, I don't know anything but tennis. And then you also see Art come to the same realization of wanting to end his career and not really wanting to continue beyond maybe, you know, finalizing this grand slam. And then just kind of how Tashi is holding him back from kind of breaking away. So it's just that, yeah, I know we're at 18 minutes.
18, we gotta go.
I know. We got okay. Well, no, this is good. You know, we don't need to come to any sort of like consensus.
Yeah, well,
This for
even if we
people to fight over.
disagree, we
Yeah,
still end up at the same point as which we like the movie, even if it was
mhm,
for one maybe liked it more passion than the other. I mean, we
mhm,
still advocate for it, but
yeah.
I never need to see it again.
Okay, so let's just talk about direction, cinematography, and music. What? How did you feel?
I thought it was a little campy, a little melodramatic occasionally, and the music I think especially added to that. And we talked about this in our first round. I found the soundtrack a little distracting, but I am aware that a different soundtrack would have really changed the mood of the film.
Yeah.
So it is its own character, the score, I mean.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I agree. It's his own character. At first, I found it kind of distracting, and before I even watched the film, I think I saw memes of the film, and I was just like, "This can't be the music that they're using for this movie." But when it hit really hard was, I think, when Tashi and Patrick have their like first fight, and like this techno music just like came in hot, and now I can't even like imagine the film without that score, you know. I think
Sure.
it's really smartly integrated, very novel in that like I just don't think movies of this kind, you know, that are like interpersonal melodramas that are sparse films, you know, use techno music like you but it just I think works really well for the story that they were telling. The intensity of those emotions and the adrenaline of like playing a game kind of marries well with like that brand of music or that genre.
To further your point, it is really nice to finally see a sports movie that is just different than an underdog story
Yeah.
in some ways, and maybe you can argue this is one a little bit, but it's just not the typical
No,
orchestral
I don't
Hans
think.
Zimmer swell
Yeah. I
kind
don't
of
think
music
either of
or
them are
storytelling.
underdogs. No, I like that. I like that. It's not an underdog tale. Oh god, I hate sports movies so much. This is my favorite sports film. Um, no, because
Okay.
like, you know, when like Art is a very hardworking, competent tennis player with all the resources behind him. And then, you know, and then Patrick is this like this phenom that also has like years of, you know, tennis tutelage, as well as, you know, some sort of like fabled, you know, very rich family. So also the resources. So like no one's an underdog in this film except for maybe Zendaya. But when they meet Zendaya, Zendaya is already like the
Doing it.
top
The promised
performing
land.
junior women's tennis
Yeah.
phenom.
She
So,
already has a
so
Nike
yeah,
deal
I
before
like that
college.
too. Everyone's yeah, God, I just love this film so much. Okay, so what do you think of the camera work? I thought there were some really cool shots.
Yeah, I mean it was it felt kind of typical, atypical sports movie with the camera on the tennis ball. Sometimes I thought the games were like really well put together, even melodramatic. If a tennis
Mhm.
game can seem melodramatic, the slow motion, I think, if we cut it all out, the movie would have been half an hour shorter.
I thought it was pretty tasteful. Because the slow motion,
Uh-huh.
I think, really gives us, like, the set like, again, the film is, like, really sexualizing the gaze, like, of these men, and, like, they're the objects of desire for the viewer and for Tashi and for each other. So, like, the slow motion is doing 2 things. It's, like, heightening the drama of the action, but it's also just, like, sexualizing these boys. And
Yeah,
yeah.
this is all true. Yes.
But it's still a hell of a lot faster than any Zack Snyder movie would have been.
Okay. Who
Yeah.
has not made a sports movie, as far as I know, but I understand the comparison.
Yeah. I guess, final thoughts, what was your favorite thing about the film? And, what does it inspire you to do different, in your own filmmaking?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Favorite moments of the film. I really like the conversation that Patrick Josh O'Connor had with the woman who had run his, or when he went in to register and he was asking for like money up
Oh, yeah.
front. I thought again, this was the first time someone really outside of that triangle came in, and maybe I liked it only because it was a break from those people. But I thought there were a lot of. It was like a really great moment of her noticing things about him. I just like the conversation. Yeah, I don't know that I consider this changed anything about my filmmaking because I feel like I haven't done anything in so long. But if I write a sports movie, I'm definitely no underdogs, more threesomes, and don't be afraid of melodrama. I think
Yeah.
that's what it do for me.
Yeah. I liked everything about the movie. If
I
I
know
made
you
a film again, I would
did.
wanna do something as impactful as this, something as sexy and cerebral and, but also, like, accessible and fun. It really did feel exhilarating to be in the last throes of that film.
Yeah.
Um, I know at a certain point, the people I went to go see it with, my partners, they're like, "When is this film going to be over?" But then that last minute kind of just like brought us back in. I never had that feeling of like thinking the film was too long, but I understand where that comes from. But I feel like the ending
Uh-huh.
is very exhilarating. Something we talked about last time, and I think it's a good place to end, is like you asked me how I interpreted the ending. So
Yes,
why don't you
yes.
go first? How did you interpret that final shot?
Yeah, I'm someone who needs to have. I'm fine if a movie sort of makes you figure out the ending on your own. But as someone who sort of knows tennis rules, I know that Art lost, and to me, he did it intentionally to sort of get back at Zendaya, which is sort of typical of all of their relationships. So for me, it was his climax. Really, it was his orgasm. Essentially, like
Mhm.
tennis is all about as a sport. I forgot. They said they based it on what a quote by Andre Agassi about how tennis is a relationship or a toxic relationship with each other.
Okay,
I forget.
interesting.
I forget what it is, but the screenwriter had mentioned that someone in their autobiography had mentioned that, and I think one of the characters almost quotes it word for word is that it's Zendaya who says tennis is really, good tennis is about a relation, two people in a relationship, and
Mhm.
I thought that was really personified well at the very, very end. But to me, Art lost intentionally to get back at Zendaya for sleeping with Patrick. That's how I read it.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of surreality going on at the very end. I don't think what we saw is necessarily supposed to be a representation of like the real world. Like maybe it happened diegetically, but maybe it's just kind of like a representation of like the intensity of like them finally like Art being driven enough to like kind of like play the way that Tashi wants him to play. Patrick finally getting to coax kind of like some sort of reaction and connection with Art, who had like pulled away from him, and also kind of like stick it to Tashi, who was trying to kind of decide the outcome of the game. The image of the two men kind of finally colliding in embracing after kind of like this like really exhilarating, you know, rally, and the energy of the crowd erupting when that happens is like I don't think that's real, but I think like the emotions and the image is like what this film was kind of, sweeping us toward.
Yeah. So
So
you liked it.
I liked it. I think
Yeah.
it's neat.
It was neat. It was
Okay,
I
okay.
I enjoyed it again with some caveats, but
Okay,
it was
we're at 27 minutes. That's
gotta cut
nearly
this
double
down.
what we were aiming for. So we're gonna stop. It was nice talking to you. We're gonna get back together and talk about I
I
saw
saw
the
the
TV
TV
glow.
glow.
All
Yeah.
right, thanks,
Okay.
Brandon.
Bye.
Bye.